All right, so I've been a constitutional lawyer for the last 38 years, and during that time I've had the good fortune of beating the federal government over and over again. The deep state, the bureaucracy, has been my enemy for 38 years. And unlike others who have been a part of that deep state or have worked in government to restrict or prevent you from exercising your rights, I've been on the other side of that equation, and the reason is that I came in the Reagan administration. I understood deeply the Constitution, and I believe that we have to fight to protect our constitutional rights against government. And particularly these days, of course, when the government is moving in the direction of a totalitarian state. You know, today, 3/4 of all federal law is not the product of those we elect. It's the product of the unelected heads of over 250 different agencies, bureaus, and departments. And so understanding that deep state, understanding its weaknesses and how to exploit those weaknesses to get rid of it is really critical to ending everything from the open border crisis to the climate change agenda and everything in between, including this massive inflationary spending. All of it involves the deep state. Increasingly, we no longer have a constitutional republic in America. What we have is a bureaucratic oligarchy. And we have individuals who want to push that even farther to the left, I'm pointing to the right, but I mean left, to a state that is a totalitarian state. And that's what we have to decide in this election. Will we, as American people, rise up and defend our rights against those who wish to take them away? They want to rule every aspect of our lives, and they're working very hard to do that. They don't want you to have a choice of whether or not to have an automobile that is driven by fossil fuels. They want you to only have the option of an EV vehicle. They don't care whether that causes you to be unable to drive. They don't even care if that prevents you from having a stove in your house or having heating in the wintertime and cooling in the summertime. In fact, they're against all of that. This is insane. The open border situation is a perfect example of this. We have a situation where drug traffickers, sex traffickers, MS-13, 18th Street gang members pour across our borders every single day. There's virtually no defense for the borders at all. And this is a planned destruction of the United States. They give those who come through, sign them up for welfare, they sign them up for food stamps, they sign them up for Medicaid, they give them cash. A family of 4 gets up to $3,000 in cash. This is planned, and it is a destruction of the United States. We have an army of 20 to 30 million illegal aliens in the United States, and we have a government that's encouraging that growth exponentially. Why is that? Why would a government do that is constitutionally obliged to defend the nation against invasion? Why would they turn over the whole country to enemies of the United States? Foreign nationals coming through who are agents of foreign powers? Here's the reason. They don't like our Constitution. They don't want our rights. They don't want anything in the way of their exercise of total power and control over each of us. This is the enemy that we feared overseas. We fought battles over and over again to prevent this enemy from gaining control. And yet, the enemy today is within. So what are we going to do about it? Let's talk about solutions. How can we solve this problem? As your United States Senator, I'll do a number of things right off the bat. First of all, we have political prisoners in this country. The J6ers are political prisoners. The government could have focused its attention solely on the arrest of individuals who assaulted police or who destroyed property. And that's a minuscule number of folks. But they engaged in mass arrests instead. And they have over 1,800 individuals that they have arrested. And many of them are in detention, in solitary confinement. And they are left virtually indefinitely without trial. And they are not being given fair trials. And they're being charged with conspiracy charges based on the flimsiest of evidence. We need to do this. I will introduce legislation to grant amnesty and immediate release to all of those who've been arrested, with the exception of those for whom there is direct evidence that they have engaged in violence against police or destruction of property. And even in those instances, I demand a fair trial. Now, we know also that we just went through an experience in which the government of the United States took our rights away en masse. That is through the COVID epidemic. They forced us to be masked. They intimidated us and coerced us and cajoled us into being vaccinated. Many individuals lost their jobs. The military, they kicked out of the military thousands of people who merely wanted to serve their country, but were told that you cannot do that without getting this experimental jab. And then they did the same thing with doctors and nurses, and they did it with police and firemen and first responders of all kinds. Well, this is what we're going to do about that. We're not only going to introduce legislation to permanently ban these sorts of mandates, but we're also going to do this. We are going to require this government to, and those who worked for it, who receive federal funds, to rehire them back into the hospitals and the fire departments and the police departments and the military, and give them their back pay and enable them to receive the promotions that they were due, because this government wrongfully denied them their right to continue to work and their right to continue to serve. And they have hurt our country enormously. And we are going to make this government pay for that injury that they caused to American citizens. Now, in addition to this, we have this massive inflation problem. Inflation is simply too many dollars chasing too few goods. Why is this? Well, one thing is this massive climate change agenda costing us over $1 trillion a year based on false information. And this whole climate change agenda would destroy the fossil fuel backbone of the American economy and really turn us into a third world country economically and really destroy our national security in the process. We're not going to let that happen. We're going to completely repeal the climate change agenda. And we're going to save $1 trillion a year from that. But that's not enough. We're also going to get rid of the Department of Energy, the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce. We're also going to get rid of numerous federal agencies, not least of which is the Federal Trade Commission. And we are also going to downsize the size and scope of the federal government. I wrote a bill for Ron Paul. I've written many bills for Ron Paul. And this bill is called the Congressional Responsibility and Accountability Act. And in one simple measure, this restores the separation of powers and it completely eviscerates the legal foundation for operation of the administrative state. What does it do? Every proposed regulation will have no legal force or effect unless passed into law by Congress. And as well, every existing regulation will be sunsetted or eliminated within 3 years of the passage of the law, unless it is passed into law by Congress. This will force a massive downsizing in the bureaucracy. It will eliminate a lot of regulations that are restricting free enterprise, and it will return back to the American people the power over free enterprise and get the government out of the way. We also need to revoke regulations that are imposed to restrict the production of oil and natural gas. We need to be energy independent. Our national security depends on it, and our economy depends on it. We can get back to $2 a gallon gas again. How do we do this? Well, we need to preempt local and state regulations that interfere with the interstate commerce in oil and gas, the production, the manufacture, production, and distribution. We also need to create tax incentives to get the jobbers who take huge risks to go back into the business of finding oil and gas. They've all fled in droves from the industry. We need them back. That's how we identify oil and gas. And on the federal level, we get rid of the climate change agenda. And this is going to enable us to have a massive economic boom in America, because we're going to see gas go down to $2 a gallon. We're going to see our nation flooded with oil and gas, and we're going to just drill, baby, drill. We're going to get that oil and gas out of the ground. We're going to get this economy cooking. By reducing the size and scope of the government, by eliminating this, we're going to save our economy. We're going to build our national security. We're going to be a nation again. But what else do we need to do? Well, you know what else we need to do in order to get this down? We need to cut taxes. And what we're going to do is reduce the two things, both the individual income tax and corporate tax. We're going to cut corporate taxes down to 15%. And that's going to, and we're going to do that predicated on companies operating here in the United States. So we're going to get all those drug manufacturers that are in China that make drugs critical to many people's lives out of China, so China doesn't have control over it, and back in the United States. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to have a flat tax. We're going to have a flat tax of 10%, and it's going to kick in when you make $200,000 and above, but not when you make money below. So that those who earn less than $200,000 are going to keep their money, and they're going to invest, they're going to save, they're going to spend, and we're going to build this economy again. Crime. Let's talk about crime quickly. We have a massive uptick in crime, and there are many reasons for this. The open border situation is a massive contributor, but in addition, we have these Soros-backed prosecutors, like Steve Descano in Fairfax County. Individuals who will not prosecute the law, who agreed to do that in order to get money to run for office. This is what we're going to do about that. We're going to enforce two laws, the Hobbs Act and Criminal RICO statute. We're going to amend them slightly so that we can do the following things. Prosecute every one of these individuals who received money from Soros-backed entities and other entities for the very purpose of not enforcing the law. What we have is individuals like Steve Descano who have not prosecuted a single sex trafficking case, not a single one in their entire term. Sex traffickers are all over Virginia. I know, I represent two families whose children have been sex trafficked in the Fairfax County Public Schools. This is an epidemic. We have got to stop this. All right, in addition to that, we have one major issue that needs to be resolved, and that issue is this. We must be free. We must have a constitution that works. We have to have limitations on government power. No more decisions by a president based on executive orders that are legislative in nature. They all have to go to Congress. We're going to live by the Constitution of the United States, and we need a constitutional conscience to do that. Now let's talk a little bit about Tim Kaine, okay? Tim Kaine is the alter ego, really, of Bernie Sanders. This man votes 94% of the time with Bernie Sanders. He's advanced this whole socialist agenda. He backed the ignominious retreat from Afghanistan, all the way to the open border situation, the climate change situation, and even the transitioning of youth. We're going to stop this. I'm going to introduce legislation that will make it a federal felony to aid or cause the transitioning of anyone under the age of 18. I'm going to enforce the Equal Protection Clause against schools and military departments that use race to divide people, because racism is unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause and also under the Civil Rights Act, and we're going to get rid of it. And if we find it when we audit these institutions, we're going to cut off federal funding to them in order to ensure that they comply. And then we're going to have true school choice in this country, where individuals who have their kids in school and want to go to another school or get them out of the public schools will be able to do so with the money that is allocated by the government to their student to be in the public school, going with them. So this will create a competitive environment and help clean up our terribly operating, horrific public school system. We've got a lot to do. These are some of the issues. Now let me tell you how we beat Tim Kaine. There are two ways to beat Tim Kaine. We have to look at the actual interaction between our candidate and Kaine in 3 debates, as well as in the entire general election period. Let me say this. The only way we beat Tim Kaine is if we incessantly attack him. He is a target-rich environment, and we need to attack him on every one of the issues. This cannot be a campaign in which you raise the flag and say, I'm a nice guy. That's been used by candidates in the past on the Republican side. It certainly doesn't work. And we need a clear contrast drawn between Tim Kaine, who is a socialist, really a communist, and between somebody like me who believes fundamentally in the Constitution of the United States, the foundational principles of this country, and knows how to fight for it and win against the government. And we need to turn that instrument of the American people against this man who is a communist. And we are going to defeat him. We are going to defeat him because he is going to be accountable. He's an artful dodger, but we're never going to relent. The ground game. How do we get the numbers to work for us? Well, you know, the good news is that the latest polling shows Donald Trump within 1% of Joe Biden in Virginia. No one thought that was possible. Donald Trump is making that possible. We need a campaign where there's no light between Donald Trump, our standard bearer, and the United States Senate candidate. And I will back Donald Trump 100%. He has been the greatest president of the United States since Ronald Reagan. He's done more for our country than any president in the modern era. We should be grateful for Donald Trump. I am, and I fully support him. And I will not be a person who turns his back on Donald Trump or in any way gives up the fight with Donald Trump to save this country. I'm with him 100%. Now, the ground game. What we need to do, and this is what I've been talking with Ren Williams, who's endorsed my candidacy. He's a member of the House of Delegates from Southwest Virginia. And Ren has also recently been appointed by the president to the Republican National Committee. We're going to register 13,000 people in Appalachia who have never been registered before. There are generations of people up there who have not been registered to vote, and they think exactly as you and I do. They are patriots, they love this country, they love the Constitution, and they love their freedom. And we're going to let them know that this is the time to stand up for America. If you haven't voted before, you've got to get registered, and we're going to incentivize that by giving them an invitation to see President Trump in Southwest Virginia, and we'll help bus them there, and we hope to get thousands to the rally, and we hope to register them outside of the rally, and that'll be thousands of individuals. And then we're going to send our volunteers back with them at the end of the rally, and we're going to ask them to help us get the rest registered, and we're going to spend months, and we're going to register 13,000 people who've never voted before. And then in addition, we're going to incentivize those people in the reddest parts of the state to vote in greater numbers. By just 3 to 6%, we will overwhelm Nova, and we will ensure victory for President Trump and for me. That's the ground game. Those are the issues. Now let me just say this, and I've been asked to address this today. Some individuals have made false ad hominem attacks against me. I usually ignore them, and I have ignored this, but it has come up repeatedly, and I'm going to answer it. Individuals have said, "Hey, Emord, you have a lot of debt in your campaign." They say upwards of half of the money that you've raised, which is close to $1 million, is debt. Well, you know what? That's very deceptive. You know why? Because the debt is to me. I have no debt to anybody else. I don't have any debt to vendors or anybody else, but I do have debt to myself. Why? Because all the money I put into my own campaign, I classify as a loan. Why do I classify it as a loan? Because if the campaign gets an enormous amount of money, I'd be able to pay myself back. But if the campaign doesn't, then I'm not going to collect against myself. So this is nonsense. And every candidate from President Trump down the line who has had the ability to self-fund does this same thing. And the reason is that it makes no sense if you could give money to your campaign and be paid back, not to be paid back. But I will never collect against my own campaign unless the money is there. So this is nonsense. I don't owe third-party vendors. I'm not in a situation where the campaign is impecunious. We've got over $1 million. I have the ability, fortunately, praise the Lord, to put in more money if necessary, and we're going to do whatever is necessary to win. This is about winning. This is about choosing a candidate who has a track record of winning. This is about protecting the Constitution. This is about ensuring that we are left alone by government. This is about ensuring that we have the right to enter the marketplace and do whatever we need to do to feed our families without the government picking our pocket or regulating us out of business. We don't need a government that makes it impossible to afford driving to work. We don't need a government that makes it impossible to go to the grocery store and buy a carton of eggs. We don't need a government that tells us what to do because of the 4 principles of the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. What does that mean? That we are all at birth entitled to equal justice under law. No one is a king in this country, despite what Biden thinks, and despite what Schumer thinks, and despite what Pelosi thinks, and despite what Tim Kaine thinks. There are no kings here. We are sovereign. The second thing, in addition to all men are created equal, we're all endowed by God with certain unalienable rights, among them the rights to life, liberty, and property. Not by government, but by God, a critical distinction. Our rights are unalienable precisely because they come from God and not government. Third principle, governments are instituted among men for the very purpose of protecting the rights of the governed. That's the purpose of government. This government in existence in the Biden administration has flipped that on its head. They're not protecting our rights, they're taking them away. They're not ensuring that we're sovereign, they're making sure that they're sovereign and that we're their servants. This has got to be eliminated. We have got to restore the Constitution. Fourth principle, that just governments derive their powers, their just powers, from the consent of the governed. That means that we are always sovereign in this country under the principles the Founding Fathers gave us, under the principles that underlie the Constitution. It is my purpose to make sure that the last best hope for freedom on earth, this magnificent country we love, remains the last best hope, remains the opportunity for each of us to live in freedom and to prosper. We can do this. The survival and success of liberty depends on you, and it depends on me. And together, we will save our Constitution. We will save our country. We will save our state. We will ensure that future generations have freedom. And we will make sure that this nation, the last best hope of freedom on earth, the greatest bastion of liberty in the history of the world, does not vanish, but prospers, is not inhibited, but grows, is not a nation in decline, but is a nation in advance towards a day when we can all say together that we have reversed all these bad directions that are taking our rights away, and that we are free once again. We will be free. This is what it's about. This election decides it. This is it. Thank you very much. I wish I were with you, but I do know this, that our hearts are one. We are in this battle together. God bless you all.